And Brian showed the dark clouds, and you showed me that.
That's right. This is the whole picture of the storm. That's what it looks like with the storm system coming in, those clouds thickening, lowering. There are no tornado warnings for where he is, but you can see right now, this is the radar picture. Of course, we do have a severe thunderstorm watch, and we do have a severe thunderstorm warning for Joplin. And when you look at the radar, you can see heading right now, right into Joplin. And what's most interesting about it, you can see it kind of bowing out. It looks like a bow.
Seeding involves the release of a material that includes silver iodide, whose crystalline structure is almost identical to natural ice. Seeding is designed to increase the number of nuclei. These are tiny specks around which cloud water coalesces to form a raindrop. When you introduce silver iodide crystals into a thunderstorm, a young thunderstorm, more of the cloud water will be converted into tiny snowflakes, which will then attract more cloud water to form raindrops. In the 6 areas of Texas where we have been doing cloud seeding, we have had a number of occasions to seed them even in this extremely hot and exceptionally dry summer.
This summer?
This summer.
You've succeeded in increasing rainfall?
South of San Antonio, we had aircraft flying on a dozen days in the month of July, treating what we deemed to be seedable storms.
And what was the result of that?
The same result that we've seen since it started in 1997. Our research done in the 1980s, which sort of laid the foundation for the state assisting groundwater districts in building these projects in the mid-1990s during the last major drought. Our research indicated that a seeded storm on average would produce 2.3 times the amount of rain that a neighboring unseeded storm would produce.
So more than double?
More than double.
And who's doing this? Who's doing it and who's paying for it?
The groundwater conservation districts in West and South Texas. Many of the counties in Texas now have these districts. They regulate the amount of pumpage in areas where there are major and minor aquifers,
And so
pools of water beneath the surface.
they're paying for it through their tax revenue?
Yes. We here at TDLR help these districts build their programs. We matched money raised at the local level with state money. And once they got their programs in place, their aircraft and radar paid for, then they assume the maintenance cost of their projects.
There's no question that large-scale climate engineering is untested and dangerous. Nevertheless, there might be some good reasons to think about aluminum. The little picture is from a nanofabrication study, which shows you can make very high quality, and do this in just a jet in a very simple way, make high quality alumina particles just by spraying aluminum vapor out. Certainly in principle possible to do that. There's a big literature that's already looked at it. There's no question that large-scale climate engineering is untested and dangerous. Nevertheless, there might be some good reasons to think about aluminum. The little picture is from a nanofabrication study, which shows you can make very high quality, and do this in just a jet in a very simple way, make high quality alumina particles just by spraying aluminum vapor out. Certainly in principle possible to do that. There's a big literature that's already looked at it.
When you look at airborne environmental samples and the soil and water samples that people have collected throughout the country, you get 3 types of materials: metallic salts, filaments or fibers, and engineered biologicals. Metallic salts are oxides. Aluminum, titanium, barium are 3 examples. And it appears now that the air around us has been filled with these metallic oxides, which are conductive particles. So the air is no longer neutral. Air is supposed to be neutral to support life. It is not supposed to be charged. The air around us is also filled with fibers. Last year, scientists began to discuss something called SAG, stratospheric aerosol geoengineering, which was supposedly spraying soot and sulfates in the atmosphere to form a shield against the heat of the sun. This presumes the notion of man-made warming, the idea being that atmospheric science can rescue us from climate change, which is nature's retaliation against us for creating global warming. For now, we're told that this is a future consideration, but for years, we've already been seeing strange clouds and hazy skies. The presence of strange clouds, persistent haze, and impaired visibility is not just in the air and sky. It must be having an effect on the ground, on the earth's soil and water. Francis Mangels is a retired federal wildlife biologist and botanist from Mount Shasta. And he notes that between the 1950s and 60s, jets did not leave many contrails. Today, what appear to be jet contrails are much more frequent and last for 10 to 20 hours. And here's what they look like over these beautiful mountains and lakes. Lab tests from Northern California show very high levels of aluminum and barium in soil and pond water. Francis Mangels told me that at 100 micrograms per liter, when he was working for the federal government, you were shut down. 1,000 micrograms per liter. So I asked him what normal is, what's tolerable, and he said 5/10. 0.5 micrograms per liter is considered normal. So here you have the findings from pond water in Mount Shasta. You can see 12,000 micrograms per liter. UG is short for microgram, which is 24,000 times normal. Snowdrift at 8,000 feet, 61,100 micrograms per liter. Way, way past normal. And here you have a lined pond. So please picture a lined pond. A pond with a liner, vinyl something, in Bella Vista. And you got a reading, or the person who did this, I know him, Dane Wigington, got a reading 375,000 micrograms per liter in this little pond. Mangels has, I will repeat, a Master's of Science in water-related subjects. And he also reports that a house, the soil tested outside this house in Northern California was 3,000 micrograms of aluminum more than the soil under the house. So what does this mean? It means that something is dropping from above and is affecting the soil around the house, but not underneath it. So you can't say that this is in the groundwater. You can't say this is in the earth itself, coming from the earth. It's got to be coming from the environment. Metallic salts have made our air conductive. This means that we and everything around us can transmit and propagate energy. The air is no longer neutral. It no longer supports in a healthy way living things. The second group of materials found in these environmental samples is unidentifiable fibers. And I really want you to appreciate the meaning of unidentifiable. These fibers have been sent to sophisticated laboratories, and there is nothing in the databases that match them. So these are fibers, we could say, that do not exist in nature. People around the world are developing lesions on their skin that ooze and produce fibers. This is known as Morgellons syndrome. Tissue samples cultured from ordinary people without this ailment contain and grow the very same fibers. The fibers or filaments are actually tubules with hollow insides. When these fibers are cultured, they produce colonies of filaments. You can see the extension filaments. And these colonies continue to grow and reproduce, branching out into more filaments and more colonies. The filament cultures can be grown from saliva samples, tissue from the skin, mucus, urine, blood, from animals and people, regardless of the presence of the Morgellons condition. The fibers are segmented with visible structures inside them. So where do these fibers or filaments come from? Airborne environmental samples that were collected by Clifford Carnicom, he is a researcher in this subject, in 2000, the year 2000, gathered at high altitude on a mountain in New Mexico, showed the presence of those fibers, whose structure matches exactly the tubular filaments. When I say fibers and filaments, basically interchangeable, showing up in our blood, tissues, and skin. Additionally, the samples collected by Mr. Carnicom showed what he calls, and was called in biology, desiccated erythrocytes. This is a multisyllabic term, but it means dried red blood cells. So, why these were in the air? Why are dried red blood cells in the air? Very puzzling. A medical microscopist, a biologist specializing in microscopy, confirmed to him that they were human red blood cells, but that they had been engineered in some way so as to be preserved. So again, you have to ask yourself, if I were 5 years old, I would say, Mommy, what are red blood cells doing falling out of the sky? Biology divides life into three kingdoms: bacteria, archaea, and eukarya. Bacteria and archaea are simple organisms with no subcellular compartments. Eukarya are complex with defined cell compartments and internal organelles, mini organs like mitochondria that make DNA and energy for the cell. Plants, animals, and humans are eukaryotic, as are fungi and slime molds. The archaea are the hardiest of the life forms. They're able to withstand grinding pressure, heat, acidity, and alkalinity. They can live in volcanoes, geysers, and the ice shelf. Bacteria, on the other hand, will die in extreme heat and cold, which is why we cook and freeze our food. Now, the materials appearing within these filaments are as tough as archaea. They look like bacteria, and they self-replicate. One looks like something called mycoplasma, but is not. One looks like chlamydia, but is not. And natural fibers, or filaments, would be classified as fungal in the domain of eukaryotes. But these fibers contain forms from the other two groups inside them. You're looking at a tubular fiber with self-replicating internal elements resembling bacteria and behaving like archaea. That does not happen in the natural world. So what are they? What's going on? It appears that within our bodies we now have all three life kingdoms replicating themselves. What does that make us? Are we still eukaryotes, or are we becoming something else? You could call this transbiology, a crossing of biology, the creation of hybrid forms. Materials are forming in our bodies that are not native to us, not natural, and entirely new. You can see in these pictures the tubular filaments with the branches. They're branching off. That's their self-replication. They're creating new colonies. And you can also see in the bottom picture a little bud. That's the beginning of a new fiber. The territory of things on the scale of atoms and molecules is the nano world. Science has opened up the nano universe, where incredible new creations are possible. Nanotechnology explores materials that are less than a micron in size, or from 1 to 100 nanometers. And a nanometer is a billionth, 1/1000th of a meter. Nature and biology continually work on the nanoscale, assembling proteins and building with crystals to conduct the business of life. Spider webs are an example of that. Very fine filaments with enormous strength and flexibility because they contain nanoscale crystals. So let's go back to the filaments and the structures they contain, these ones that Clifford Carnicom has found. In those unidentifiable filaments, he has observed the formation of red blood cells and submicron-sized structures. So now you've got a filament making its own red blood cells. The engineered cells, the red blood, very, very tough, withstanding excesses of heat and chemicals, indicating that they are designed to endure almost anything. He has put them in a Bunsen flame, he has poured bleach on them, acid, and they still endure. In addition, they are able to replicate, growing outside of the body in a petri dish. This is highly sophisticated technology, going on by itself, not in a laboratory. So we're witnessing red blood growing outside, having nothing to do with the bone marrow, in a petri dish, in somebody's very low-level lab. Could it be that artificial materials are being introduced into living things? Here you have, this comes from the nanotech industry. It's what I call the nanotech pyramid. You start with materials, you go up to structures, processes, and devices. Could it be that artificial materials are being introduced into us to create new processes from the ground up, which processes will override our own natural biology, our own internal systems? People with advanced Morgellons syndrome started with fibers coming out of their skin, and they're now observing very strange crystalline forms and metallic devices. The fibers became multicolored, and now they were accompanied by plaques, strange, hard little, almost like shards. People say they're like glass, and they're colored. The lesions keep emitting these things. They don't heal over or close, sometimes for years. Here are more plaque structures, even grooved metallic devices. On the right you'll see one device, the front and the back. These images are supplied by Jan Smith of MorgellonsExposed.com, who has done extensive research on biotech websites, looking for things that match what comes out of her body, and she's finding them. The fibers from her skin were from high-density polyethylene. The fiber strands that you see here were made of cellulose and GNA. GNA is glucans polysaccharide sugars, and this was confirmed by microscopy. GNA is a synthetic cousin of DNA. It has a 3-carbon glycerol sugar in it instead of the 5-carbon that you find in DNA. Here's a news report from April 2008 in which we are told, big headlines, GNA is DNA's chemical cousin. It's a nanotechnology building block. The Biodesign Institute at Arizona State develops the first self-assembled nanostructures composed entirely of GNA, synthetic analog of DNA. The nanostructures contain additional properties not found in DNA, including the ability to form mirror image structures. An NIH article from Japan, on research from Japan, also tells us that various conductive polymers and gold nanoparticles are entrapped within the helical superstructure of this GNA. Now, the particular sugar found in this GNA is called beta-1,3-glucans. And here you see it under what's called a Raman spectroscope, very sophisticated equipment. It looks, the microscopist who looked at this called it a sugar snake. So this is the GNA that you're looking at. When Jan's fibers were put to a high heat flame, they released what she calls a gold payload. So they dropped out this tiny little bead of gold. And here's more. The fibers that contain a head, she calls it a golden head, orbs, and they all have this payload in them. Here you have a nano array that she found, a couple of them in her body. Nano array is a tiny device used in biotech for DNA hybridization. And on the left you see a diagram from an industry website of a nano array, and on the slide you can see actually two of them. She's marked them with red X's that came out of her body, looking exactly like this. And again, I'll say it again, the nano arrays are these tiny devices that are used for DNA hybridization. So what processes are going on here? Are these materials combining to form devices that are working together inside us? What is happening to our biology? And remember that tissue samples obtained from ordinary people who have no Morgellons symptoms, no lesions, can be cultured to produce the very same filaments found in people with Morgellons. Jan's body has been sending out these plaques, colored plaques, which are hard pieces of silica. Some of them have these dots on them. They're very small. They require handling with a needle as she places them under a microscope. The plaques are fragile. They can shatter. Quantum dots, which are the colors you see, are nanocrystal semiconductors made of heavy metals surrounded by an organic shell. Now I want you to remember some of these terms. Heavy metals, okay? Heavy metals, aluminum and so forth. So these are nanocrystal semiconductors surrounded by an organic shell, but they are made of heavy metals. And Morgellon subjects are also finding this stuff. Jewel-like hexagons, faceted pyramids, crystals. Hexagons have shown up environmentally, not only in tissues, but they are in environmental fallout. Now here are the nanotechnology dyes. And there you see the colored plaques that have been coming out of people's bodies. One on the below has fibers attached to it. The industry tells us that quantum dots are tiny nanocrystals whose small size gives them unprecedented tunability. Okay? Tunability. The piezoelectric effect is the internal generation of a voltage when an outside pressure is applied, and vice versa. You can Google the piezo effect. The piezo effect occurs in crystals, ceramics, DNA, and certain proteins. So an example is, when you put a frequency to a crystal, it generates a voltage. And when you put a voltage to a crystal, it responds with a frequency. We call this piezoelectricity. Electricity resulting from applied compression or frequency. Recent work by Clifford Carnicom reveals that a filament culture subjected to a blue light frequency, that's 375 nanometers, resulted in explosive growth of the culture within 24 hours after the initial incubation. So he put the blue light on, incubated it for 5 to 7 days, and then it exploded into all those little fibers that you see. We now live in a frequency-filled world. I don't have time to address HAARP, artificial weather, and the enormous spread of unnatural frequencies that are affecting the Earth today, but I will say this. I came across a very well-known paper on electromagnetic fields and neurological function, written by Professor Ross Adey, Loma Linda School of Medicine, with the subtitle, A Possible Paradigm Shift in Biology. We learn that the Earth's own natural magnetic field peaks, that means peaks, top, at 32 hertz. And that only happens in certain equatorial thunderstorms. The electronics we use today generate electromagnetic fields that are tremendous in the megahertz and gigahertz, million hertz and billion hertz range. So here you can see Earth and nature up at the top, 3 to 30 hertz. You can see HAARP has a low range. Then you see the Gwen towers, that's ground wave emergency network, the blue. HAARP again has another range right after that. Gwen has another range after that. And look at the phones and internet. We're talking about million hertz and billion hertz. Professor Adey reminds us that chemical bonds are magnetic bonds, formed between atoms by paired electrons with opposite spins that are attracted magnetically. So if nature itself moves in the 3 to 30 hertz range, what is happening to us on the biochemical level with all the different frequencies our bodies are experiencing? What is being done to our biology? The field of synthetic biology is a new frontier of science. It draws from biochemistry and biomedicine, genetics, robotics, radiation biology, and information technologies. Using nanotechnology, its goals are to improve and transcend the limits of nature. On February 21st of this year, Time magazine had a feature story on the singularity, the term signifying the merging of man with machine. The story was released on Valentine's Day, February 14th, to underscore a love affair, the marriage of humanity and technology. The article tells us that a transformation is coming, and our species, Homo sapien, will no longer be recognizable as itself. We will be something new, something better. The time predicted for this transformation is 2045. The man who is making this prediction is Ray Kurzweil, a futurist known for his uncanny accuracy in just this area, the pace at which technology grows and improves, such that it will one day be smarter and better than us. That's the singularity.
The three great overlapping revolutions sometimes goes by the letters GNR. G stands for genetics. Really, another word for it is biotechnology. It is mastering the information processes in our biology. We ultimately will be able to reprogram biology away from disease and from aging. N stands for nanotechnology. In the next 25 years, we will have blood cell-sized devices that go inside your body, keeping you healthy from inside, go in your brain, and interact with your biological neurons, and allow us to merge with non-biological intelligence. The third one, which goes by the letter R, which stands for robotics, really though, refers to artificial intelligence. And that's the most significant revolution of all. In about 20 years, I've set the date 2029, a machine, an AI, will be able to match human intelligence and go beyond it. Artificial intelligence, which will give us not just more human intelligence, but will actually give us superhuman intelligence, will enable us to solve problems that we're not able to solve today. Biology is very impressive, intricate, clever, but also very suboptimal compared to what ultimately we will be able to engineer with nanotechnology. We are building devices now that are at the nanoscale. This is a design for a robotic red blood cell. Conservative analysis shows that we would replace a portion of your red blood cells with the robotic version, and you could do an Olympic sprint for 15 minutes, without taking a breath, or sit at the bottom of your pool for 4 hours. We'll be able to download software against specific pathogens, including ones that have never been seen before. Not be subject to autoimmune disorders. And if you look at what in principle would be feasible with nanotechnology, we could go far beyond the limitations of our version 1 bodies.
What indeed is the World Wide Web? We may think it's the internet, but it will be the humming network of everything connected through ubiquitous intelligence, intelligence that is everywhere. Artificial intelligence will connect the world. Homo sapien will be transformed into Homo evolutus. Biological processes will be run by technology. Living things will not be reproductive. The earth will be populated with engineered species, and all processes will be patented, licensed, and controlled. You could consider nanotechnology the installation of artificial intelligence in living and non-living things. Smart dust and smart motes, for instance, are tiny nanosensors that can float and land anywhere. As Kurzweil declares, self-replicating nanotechnology will infuse everything around us with itself. You have seen today the deposition and active presence of artificial materials in the sky, environment, and in living things. Nanotechnology has arrived at our personal doorstep without our permission. It isn't that this will happen in 2045. It's already here. Human enhancement is being sold to us as leaping tall buildings in a single bound and having better, faster, higher intelligence, perfect health. But all of that is the sales pitch. Enhancement may in fact be degradation, our being devolved to someone else's specifications. While nanobiotechnology promises in headlines to make our world better, it may in fact be busy taking us over so it can tailor us to the plan for the hive. Already transhumanists are looking forward to the creation of the post-human. An improved human that will have no gender, will not reproduce, will be a better performer in the workplace, will not be distracted by love or lust, will be free of disease thanks to these nanobots keeping it healthy. But all this is part of the fantasy. In reality, thanks to stressors on our physiology, infertility is soaring, our sexuality is diversifying, and the nuclear family is falling apart. Biotech is an exploding frontier. It is clever enough and small enough to enter and change our very cells. New forms of DNA have been invented. There's GNA, as I told you about, and PNA, a hybrid of protein and DNA that will add to our double helix a third strand. When nanobiotech has a firm footing in us, it will be easy to upgrade and downgrade anyone and anything in any way. Oliver Curry, an evolutionist at the London School of Economics, predicted in 2007, the human race will one day split into two separate species, an attractive, intelligent ruling elite and an underclass of dim-witted, ugly, goblin-like creatures. So here you have the e-workers and the elites. Transhumans will presumably be involved in this process, the process of transformation, the process of renovation, remaking us into what someone considers improved. We are transhumans now. Improved is only what fits certain specifications. For instance, a specimen that can work 18 hours a day, a specimen that is sterile, that will never have the responsibility of caring for others, a specimen that is even-tempered, with a narrow, predictable range of expression. All this is enhanced, improved. Better performance is just that, the ability to produce a better result. It does not mean a specimen with greater skills. It may mean a specimen with narrower skills and the ability to repeat a task. So while the current ethical debate is about whether or not we should upload computers into our brains and how human we will be when that happens, there is something happening on the nanoscale right now. What it is exactly is unknown to us. As attempts by lay people to communicate with scientists about Morgellons-type materials are going nowhere. There is a blackout on this subject. Its victims are dismissed as having a psychological problem that is called delusional parasitosis.
Nanobots will infuse all the matter around us with information. Rocks, trees, everything will become these intelligent computers. At that point, we can expand out into the rest of the universe. We'll be sending nanotechnology infused with artificial intelligence. Swarms of those will go out into the universe and find other matter and energy that we can then harness to expand the overall intelligence of our human-machine civilization. the universe will wake up. It will become intelligent, and that will multiply our intelligence trillions of trillions fold. We can't fully contemplate, that's really the main reason this is called the singularity. But regardless what you call it, it will be the universe waking up. So, does God exist? I would say not yet,